Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Nick and Joe Show. I'm Nick, he's Joe, and he's sitting across the table from me because, was I here last week too?
No, Nick, you were not here last week.
No, it was the week before.
It was the week before.
It's a nice trend, but it's still a little on the unusual side. But it's always a pleasure to be in studio because it's so much. I just think it's more entertaining. Certainly for me, it is to be in studio than it is to be out on the farm from a show point of view.
Well, it's always easier, Nick, when you can actually see one another. You know, people don't realize how hard it is to do talk shows and interviews, etc., when you're remote. And that includes call-in shows where people, as you know, you did for many years, call-in show on the weekends on CFRA. And, so much of what you do is the cues that you pick up are nonverbal.
That's right.
So when we're remote, as listeners probably have noticed, sometimes there's a gap when we're either talking over one another and then we both shut up waiting for the other person to finish,
right?
And that, but
or one person finishes and the other guy doesn't know he's done.
Less so, but yes, you're right.
Yeah.
So for sure, there's for sure a great advantage in terms of the smoothness of conversation, of being in the studio together. And, this actually brings up the first topic. But before we get to that, just a second, Nick, let's just do the housekeeping.
Sure.
If you're listening to the show live and you want to participate in the chat room, click on the chat or comment bubble. You probably are going to have to register or log in, one or the other. And that's to make sure you're a real flesh and blood human being.
We don't want those phony ones.
We don't want the phony flesh and blood human beings. Only the real flesh and blood
human
beings. And that's right. Where else was I going to say? Oh, if you're listening to the podcast, the rebroadcast podcast, you can still make comments, leave your comments doing the same thing.
Right.
But, they won't be in a chat room and you won't be able to interact live with people. So, it's always better to listen to the show live. But anyway, talking about doing something remotely, so the Conservative Party here in Canada, the Federal Conservative Party, just finished their biennial national convention, and they did it all online, all virtual. There was nobody attending.
No face-to-face.
Anything. And so I think it was. I didn't actually get to catch any of it live. I've seen some recordings of some of the sessions, and I have to tell you, it's a lunch bag letdown. And forget about all of the controversy. We'll get into some of that as we move forward. But just the mechanics of it, the visuals, the dynamic. It's sort of like going to a hockey game, as you were mentioning earlier this evening, Nick, when we were talking about this. Going to a hockey game or watching a hockey game on TV, and there's no one in the stands.
Yeah.
And so there's no cheering. And so what they've tried to do is they've tried to invent cheering by using the canned.
Well, as I mentioned
crowd.
to you, if you remember back, if I hate this phrase, back in the day when there was this hockey you could play at a bar, it was covered with a plastic dome and you had little figures you moved back and forth on the surface of the ice. You had this little tiny little puck you'd bang around and try and score on your buddy. And there was a boo button. You hit the boo button and this chorus of boos would rain down. And that's what this feels like. You watch the game, like I'm a huge Toronto Maple Leaf fan. And they played a good game the other night, and they won after losing like 3 in a row, which is painful to watch. But it's felt flat. Like there's just nothing. There's nothing that really, yes, it's fun to watch the skill level of these guys, no question. I mean, these are the best athletes, most highly conditioned athletes in the world that have to have the single largest set of skills in order to play their sport at that level.
Except rugby players.
No, I'll put them over. Rugby players don't do it with knives on their feet. Sorry. Anyway, as much as I know you love rugby, I'm pulling your chain. But anyway, the point is that it's just flat. The players miss it, the coaches miss it, even the referees miss it.
Yeah, it is an odd thing.
It is
to watch this watch these shows.
So to do a conference this way?
Well, again, I assume most of it was, but you want to have the crowd, you want to have people reacting,
you want the energy,
want that excitement and that dynamic.
That's
and
right.
All that stuff. And I watched Aaron O'Toole's keynote speech, and I have to tell you, I hate being critical all the time. So, but I just don't see how I can't be critical in this case. And so picture Aaron O'Toole, and it's a virtual. He's giving the speech to a camera.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, he's not talking to a crowd. So, but whoever briefed him, whoever did the prep, set it up in such a way that he would pace back and forth on the stage, looking out as though he was talking to a crowd. And the speech went this way, and I found it terribly distracting. And I thought it was really, really, the visuals on this were really, really bad. And I'll tell you why, Nick, okay? Everybody in the world knows that this is a virtual conference, okay? So, I know what people are going to say. They're going to say, well, he looks like he's talking to a crowd. That's a good thing, right? And I'm saying, no. He looks like a person who's pretending to talk to a crowd, because there is no crowd. There's no real cheering or anything like that. There's no applause or anything, real applause. And so, it's like having a newscaster pretending to talk to an audience out there.
Yep.
No. If you're talking to the camera because that's the situation you're in, then talk to the camera. Why pretend? And it just looked, I have to tell you from my perspective, and a few people I've spoken to have agreed with this. I don't know if it's widely held, but I just think he looked foolish, which is too bad, because he's not foolish. He's not a fool, but I just don't think he looked good, and I think that's the advice he got. I don't think that people said, you have to, when you're doing this kind of a speech, you have to talk to the camera. And I don't see him saying, nah, forget it, I know more about this stuff, communication stuff, than you do, and overriding his advisors. So I think that this was, the kind of communications advice he got, and I think it was very poor advice. And if they'd done a dry run, it's hard for me to see that they wouldn't have seen that. Just picture one more example of the President of the United States. Okay, when the President of the United States is giving his speech, wherever, if he's on a stage
State of
somewhere,
the Union,
or
whatever it is,
Congress doing State of the Union, he'll move around. He'll look around because he's talking to the audience, okay?
Yeah.
But when he's addressing the nation of 300 million people, and that's just the Americans, not set aside people around the world who are tuning in, he's sitting in the Oval Office, and he's looking at the camera, and he's talking to you, the individual who was on the other side of that camera, who is watching from your television or your computer console or whatever else. That's what works. So just from a purely managed stage presence point of view, forget about content or anything like that. I think he was very badly advised on this, and I don't think it helped his image at all.
Well, actually, in the chat room, which is already active, Chris made the comment. He said, if you're permitted to have 25 people in a room, why didn't they put O'Toole in a room with 25 people just to generate the appearance of an audience? Not necessarily. It's certainly better advice than what he got, because, look, from my opinion is that Mr. O'Toole is charismatically challenged. He may be a solid, salt-of-the-earth guy. But having said that, so is Stephen Harper. He wasn't exactly give you the warm and fuzzies. And neither does Aaron O'Toole. But that doesn't mean that you just take this tactic where you look, you pretend like no, people see through it. You're right that, if you're walking around a stage with nobody in the room, who are you talking to? The camera's over there. And stop walking around. It's distracting. It doesn't look good. It doesn't look leadership You're not taking charge. You're being scripted, and you're following stage marks.
Well, and listen, nothing wrong with doing that at the appropriate time.
And in front of an audience, you're absolutely right.
And you've seen many talks. There's where the speaker will have a lapel mic or maybe a little boom mic off of hanging on his ear or whatever, and he'll walk around and he'll interact with the audience. I think it's a great way to communicate with the audience, and I think it's a great way to give a speech.
Yeah.
But you have to have an audience, and you have to have, for that to work, a significant audience. Now, here's the thing. You can invent an audience. You could create a virtual audience, not just with 25 people. You don't even have to have anyone in the room. You can create a virtual audience. Look, performers do this on movies all the time, where the guy's up there and he's giving a speech to 25,000 people in the arena. Okay, well, there's nobody in the arena.
It's all green screen.
It's green screened. Okay,
yeah.
There's no crowd there. So, but you can act the part. But the difference here is we all know there's nobody in the room except for a handful of people. We all know it's not an audience. It's a virtual presentation. So give us the virtual presentation. You did not look natural. This does not make you look natural. It makes you look like you're somebody pretending that there's a real audience there.
All right, so that's basically a summation of that particular aspect of it. And you know more about what happened at the convention than I do. But undoubtedly, there were going to be controversies surrounding this. Which one do you think was top of the list at this convention?
I'm sorry, repeat the question?
Well, I was just saying that you have, at every convention, there's usually some kind of issue that's right. The key issue.
Well,
or call it controversy if you want. What was it in this case?
Well, I think the obvious choice here is, and this is what the press has been writing about for the last 3 days, and that is the fact that Aaron O'Toole made an appeal to the delegates to the convention, the virtual delegates to the virtual convention, to support with their vote a motion affirming that climate change is real, and the Conservative Party wants to do something about climate change, and the party, the members, the delegates to the convention refused to support that motion. And so it was for sure a big defeat for Aaron O'Toole and his leadership. And that's the real controversy that's come out of this whole thing. And that's what everybody's talking about. That's what everybody's writing about. I feel for Aaron O'Toole, but the motion was poorly worded. Okay, for instance, I believe in climate change. I believe in natural climate change.
Right.
I don't believe in man-made climate change. Do human beings have some impact on the climate? I don't know how much, but certainly, the idea of a climate emergency is just foolishness as well. But he could have presented some kind of a serious response to climate change, and more appropriately, a conservative response to the left-wing liberal approach to climate change. In other words, he could have said, look, climate change is real, but it's not an emergency. And that's what the Conservative Party of Canada believes in. That's what the Conservative Party of Canada does believe in. Whatever Aaron O'Toole believes in or doesn't, that's what the Conservative Party of Canada believes. That's what the members believe. Now, some of them are going to say there's no such thing as climate change. Some of them are going to say there's, like I do, of course there's climate change, but it's natural, and human impact on it is minimal. Some, like me, will go even further and say even if it's all caused by human activity,